This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
So we have to talk about our expectations for Deshaun Watson this upcoming season, because since the Browns were able to accomplish so much with so many injuries at the quarterback position, once people kind of get down from however they feel about this playoff game and look up and realize that again, the expectations for the next season are going to be high, and they're not going to be high in the hopeful sense, right? Because sometimes expectations are high because we hope, right? I think this playoffs was a perfect example. Our expectations were kind of high because as Browns fans, we were hopeful that things might go our way. But that's very different. Like, having expectations because you're hopeful is a very different beast than having expectations because you expect. See, hopeful expectations, they don't get nobody fired. Hopeful expectations, you might be mad, disappointed when it doesn't happen, but ultimately you can appreciate the run. That's where we are with what happened with the Texans game. Some of us are still mad. For the most part, everybody's just glad that we went on that ride, because we were just hopeful. We had hopeful expectations, especially after Deshaun. Like, even when Deshaun Watson got back, like, he had missed so much time this year that even our expectations once he returned were somewhat hopeful, not necessarily expecting. Our expectations at the beginning of the year were most certainly, we expect to be good. But then everybody got hurt and it turned into hopeful expectations. And here's the difference between hopeful expectations. Kevin Stefanski lost that game to C.J. Stroud. The Browns lost that game to C.J. Stroud, and nobody's getting fired. Nobody's getting replaced. Nobody's getting traded. On the flip side, you look at a team that had a similar disappointment in the playoffs, and you see the Dallas Cowboys. And the Dallas Cowboys, they didn't have hopeful expectations. They had true expectations. Like, they had expectations that they were expecting, and they didn't live up to them. And the sentiment around that from people who are Cowboys fans, and especially people who aren't Cowboys fans, is much harsher when people are expecting you do something versus when people are hoping you do something. And this year, there were so many injuries that we were just hoping. But next year, we're not hoping anymore. We're expecting. It's very different. And a lot of that's going to fall on the shoulders of the quarterback of the team, Deshaun Watson. Not just because the team won 11 games. Not just because they started 4 different quarterbacks, but because at the end of the season, the best gains when it comes to yardage and even QBR of the Browns weren't by Deshaun Watson this year, right? Deshaun Watson did not have the high QBR for the season. Deshaun Watson did not have the high passing yardage or passing touchdown number for this season. Joe Flacco did. And whether it was Joe Flacco, Jacoby Brissett, anybody else, somebody else other than the guy that the Browns traded for did that. Now, is that the whole story? Absolutely not. Is there more to it? Absolutely. But that's how people are going to look at it. That's what people are going to boil this down to. The expectations are high, and they're not just hopeful anymore. We're expecting them. And that pressure isn't going to go on Nick Chubb. That pressure isn't going to go on Jed Wills. That pressure isn't going to go on Myles Garrett even. It's going to go on Deshaun Watson. Now, when we talk about expectations for Deshaun Watson, there's a wide range of where people sit. There's some people who expect nothing but the worst from him because they don't think they've seen enough in the last couple of years. There are people who expect what the Browns traded for, which is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, right? They traded 3 first-round picks, $230 million for Deshaun Watson, which at the time was top quarterback money. Now, $230 million is not top quarterback money anymore. It's like the 8th or 9th highest quarterback contract in the NFL, when in quarterback contracts have ballooned to like 270. I think with Joe Burrow almost got 300. So the 230 number, it's going to go down and not be as important. But what that deal says is more important than what the deal number is now, right? Like the deal said that we think that this is a franchise quarterback. And I think that's where my expectations are of Deshaun Watson. He should be what Kevin Stefanski said he is, a franchise quarterback. Now, a lot of people have made this issue of, does Kevin even want Deshaun Watson? Right? Is this who Kevin wants? Did Kevin get to pick his quarterback? I understand how people got here, but I don't believe that to be true. Because whenever you hear Kevin Stefanski talk, interact, or even speak about Deshaun Watson, I believe it is blatantly clear he is enamored. He is somebody who is probably at the forefront of the conversation to bring Deshaun Watson in here. I've never seen Kevin stick his neck out for a quarterback like he has stuck his neck out for Deshaun Watson, right? When he had to sit Deshaun Watson because of the injury in the Indy game, he did not just sit him. He said, I am making sure I'm letting you know I'm not benching him and that he is our franchise quarterback. That is something that he never did for any other quarterback that wore the uniform. He has stuck his neck out for this dude. So I think a lot of the narratives that Kevin doesn't like him or Kevin can't make things work with him, I think that's kind of just fluff. I don't think the big problem that the Cleveland Browns are concerned about with Deshaun Watson are if him and Kevin Stefanski can figure things out. Honestly, I think they feel fine about that. To pretty good, honestly. Like if I were them, I would feel fine to pretty good about that. Why would I feel fine and pretty good about that? I've explained this in other videos, but if you have not heard it, here's why. When you're incorporating changes to an offense to build around a quarterback, right? Which is what the Browns are doing with Deshaun Watson, right? They're changing their offense from the generic basic version of it to add some elements that are custom to Deshaun Watson. When you do that, the one thing you really need is Deshaun Watson to be healthy. The reason you need Deshaun Watson to be healthy is because the only way you're going to figure out all the kinks and bugs of the offense while trying to build it around that one player is to use that one player a ton. We saw this in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken. Early in the season, there was a lot of criticism of Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken not being able to figure it out, not looking as smooth. It doesn't look as crisp as it did with the Greg Roman system. But then you gave that thing like 6, 7, maybe even 8 games. And all of a sudden, we're talking about Baltimore's offense is shooting through the roof. And Lamar Jackson is looking as good as he's ever been. And he's on his way to a second MVP. And look at his passing yard numbers. He looks spectacular. When you're building an offense around somebody, you really need live game reps with that person you're building the offense around. The fact is that the Cleveland Browns started to build this offense around Deshaun Watson this offseason, but only got, 3 consecutive games at a time out of Deshaun Watson, which is not enough time to knock out all the kinks. And even then, by the time that Deshaun Watson got hurt, we were talking about him as if he were figuring it out each time, right? He starts the Cincinnati game off, and he had a good enough game against Cincinnati. Had an awful game versus Pittsburgh. Tennessee game, really good. We think we're starting to figure it out. What happens? He misses the next 5 weeks with the shoulder injury. Okay. He comes back from that shoulder injury. Looks really good against the Cardinals, but they're the Cardinals, so we don't really take that one serious. Then he comes back against Baltimore and has the best half of football he's had as a Cleveland Brown, wins the most difficult game that the Browns have played all season, on the road against the 1 seed. And we saw what happened against the Browns when they were on the road versus just a playoff team in Houston. He was able to do that, win that game, give the Browns real hope. And we were thinking, hey, if this is who we're getting, we can win the Super Bowl this year with this guy at quarterback because we just beat the best team in the AFC on the road. And we're thinking, hey, we're putting this together. It's put together. We're about to start rolling, right? After that second game that he got back. Then he got hurt. Then he didn't play again. Everything's been so start and stop with him. But even in the start and stop, you saw it start to work. Kevin's really good at his job. Deshaun Watson is a multiple-time Pro Bowl quarterback. They're going to figure out something that's going to work. They've had enough success to where I'm pretty sure they're going to figure something out. That's not where I think the Browns' concern is, to be honest with you. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, I'm concerned about Deshaun Watson's ability to stay healthy. Because them figuring it out or them, getting the reps together, that all doesn't matter if he can't stay healthy. And the reason I'm concerned about the injury, like if he had just had one injury all season and that was it, it was a freak injury, he hurt himself, I'm not going to be sitting here worried about the injuries because that happens all the time in football. But what concerns me is that he's having these wear and tear injuries between the season-ending injuries, like a shoulder injury creating a bruise in his throwing shoulder to the point where he can't throw the football and grip it and let it rip like he wants to. Man, that feels like wear and tear. I'm not sure if it's wear and tear, but it feels like wear and tear. And then he finally comes back from that injury just to break a bone in that same shoulder. Let's also keep in mind the fact that Deshaun Watson does not necessarily do a good job of avoiding taking hits. Now, this is something that when he was in Houston and in college, he was applauded for, right? Because everybody loves quarterbacks who take hits until that quarterback plays for your team and gets injured, right? Bengal fans used to love the fact that Joe Burrow took those hits. And then he broke his wrist and went out for the year. And now they're going to be a lot more cautious about Joe Burrow taking those hits. Everybody loves the quarterback that we did the same thing with Baker. We loved that he took those hits and went out to block people. And then he tore his labrum. Everybody loves the quarterback who gets in there, gets physical until that quarterback gets hurt. Then it becomes a problem. And that requires a mindset change for Deshaun Watson. He has to put himself in less positions to get hurt. Because all of this does not matter. If he and Kevin figures it out, all of this don't matter if he can't get on the field. Because for the Cleveland Browns, that's what I fear could happen. He's 29. He's getting older. His body's breaking down. He had multiple throwing shoulder injuries this year. And despite that, he still made these quasi-reckless decisions with his body. Again, he gets applauded for him in a moment, right? Continuing to play a game with a high ankle sprain and a broken shoulder. And finishing it, and not just finishing it, winning it, making plays while he's doing that. He gets credit for that. But the same thing that makes him still want to play is the same thing that makes me worry if he's going to be able to make the adjustment to not getting hurt. I think all of the other concerns about Watson are a bit overblown. I think he's going to be fine. We've seen him make some throws. He still has that athletic ability. He still has that physical talent. It's not a muscle injury that he's recovering when his throwing shoulder. It's just a bone injury. But the real question is, can he not sustain so many injuries? Because that will define his stay in Cleveland.